Jeff Ward, and the only agenda here is to make you think. After all this time, we're still at the same place with the same comments about our suspended Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And those words are gross, and I don't get it. Yeah, it's been pretty consistent over time. Gross, and I don't get it. I've been behind a microphone for the entire time that Ken Paxton has been the Attorney General of the state of Texas. And even before that, but his entire time as the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Texas. Those who've been around from the beginning, which would date back to 2015 with Ken Paxton, and those that just now hear about the story or read about the story today, reasonable and normal people do say and have always said the same thing. They end up in that place. Gross, and I don't get it. The Texas Senate will decide if Ken Paxton will remain Attorney General. And if they choose to not find him guilty of 16 articles of impeachment and remove him from office, he will keep his job as the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Texas, and he will get reelected easily again and again. We know that. The man is a cesspool of scandal. He's like quicksand of scandal. He's had felony indictments hanging over his head for years, and he won re-election every single time. Easily, he won re-election every single time. If he's not removed from office now, and I don't know that he will be, he'll win again. So what's gross? You say, wait a second, gross? Yeah, gross is it. See, reasonable and normal people with a life. These are people with jobs. These are people with families. These are people with stuff to do. They're not sitting at home with Fox News in the background 24/7 like it's on a loop. People that aren't political hacks and suck-ups and consume what used to be, we thought were politics, but it's culture wars now. People that don't do that stuff all the time say the same thing from the very beginning that you're saying now about Ken Paxton and all of the stuff about him. Gross. First of all, the gross part. Then I don't get it part. I can break him down into two. What's gross? Him. Yeah, the guy is gross. What else is gross? Well, pretty much everything about him and around him. His trial for political corruption at the Senate, it's straight out of The Sopranos. He's sort of in a weird, gross kind of way, straight out of The Sopranos. It's gross, and people have always said this, that his top political donor is sitting in jail for helping him cover up his affair. It's gross that he used fake Uber names and burner phones. It's gross that he didn't step down in shame. You could pick a time, any time, almost any month that the man has been the Attorney General. You could pick a time and say it's gross that he chooses not to step down in shame because, well, he has no shame. That's gross. It's gross, and he's gross because his entire ultra-conservative staff would tell him not to get into and take financial favors from the now jailed donor, who seems to be a friend too, so he could hook up with his mistress. It's gross that he never cared that we'd all find out. Didn't seem like he cared. It's gross that he didn't even bother to show up a day or at least two to his own trial and instead, reportedly, this is gross, had drinks and a massage at an expensive country club. He had to know we would know that. Of course, he doesn't care because he's gross. It's gross that his senator wife, who is recused but is at the Capitol because she has to be at the Capitol, is watching the trial and, based on pictures we all get, smiling and laughing. Their public display, sorry, I don't know what else you say about it. Their public display is gross. It's gross that his ultra-conservative staff had to rat out their gross boss. It's really gross that he then fired them. They think Ken Paxton is such a slimy, gross politician, a new level of gross and slimy, They think he's so slimy, they risk their political careers to testify against their boss. It's gross that he's won re-election with felony indictments hanging over his head multiple times. Right? So normal people, reasonable people with a life, think the guy is gross. Normal from the very beginning, even until now, even today, somebody just paying attention today. Normal and reasonable people also say, I don't get it. From the very beginning, you've had if you're reasonable and normal and not a political hack with Fox News on 24/7, you've said the same thing from the beginning. I don't get it. Yeah, you're right. There's no way a normal and reasonable person could understand why the chief law enforcement officer is such a slime ball, a gross slime ball, and keeps getting elected. Yeah. Normal and reasonable people don't understand how he could keep winning elections. It's pretty remarkable. From the very beginning, it's been remarkable. Normal and reasonable people can't understand how he beat, it's happened several times, but recently a member of the Bush family. Normal and reasonable people can't figure out how he beat another Republican in the last primary by 36 points, even though he had scandal all around him like he always does. Normal and reasonable people can't get why he may not lose his job now. He might not. And if you're normal and reasonable, you can't get that. It makes no sense whatsoever, and it shouldn't. Normal and reasonable people don't get why Republicans, from early on, can't find a conservative attorney general that's not gross and doesn't act like Tony Soprano. It's never made sense to any normal and reasonable person why you just couldn't find somebody else without all this stuff going on. Normal and reasonable people surely can't understand why so-called religious conservatives could keep reelecting a guy that cheats on his wife and fires anyone who outs him. Normal and reasonable people can't understand how religious people would find anything redeeming about this gross guy. Yeah. You shouldn't be able to get that either. Normal and reasonable people, from the beginning and even now, even when this whole circus of a trial, this Cohen brothers-like trial at the Capitol, why it is the governor of Texas, the face of the state of Texas, the face of the Republican franchise, normal and reasonable people can't understand why at no point has the governor of Texas said, this is a bad look. No. I'm the face of the franchise. I'm the face of the party, which is the franchise. We can do better. This is not okay. Normal and reasonable people can't get why it is he's never said one word about the whole thing, not even now. Nothing. You can't get it, right? You're normal and reasonable. You can't understand it. See, normal and reasonable people have been saying the same things the entire time. Whether you followed it in 2015 when he got into office with baggage, or you're trying to follow it now, you just can't understand how somebody could be so slimy and still keep getting reelected. Why just now would they be trying to run the guy out of office? Yeah. So normal and reasonable people don't understand this part. Here's the explanation. You've got the gross part exactly right. So here's the explanation as to why you don't get it and you shouldn't get it. Here's why. 3% of all voters, okay? 3% of all voters vote in Republican primaries. But the winners of those primaries win nearly, I should say every, but I'll say nearly, win nearly every election. So the 3% of rural, white, Fox News watching, angry people vote for the gross Ken Paxton. Here's what you don't get, and you shouldn't be able to get because no reasonable and normal person operates this way. He keeps getting reelected by the 3%. 3% show up for a primary. He wins a primary, you're in. It decides everything. It is the most lopsided, probably the most lopsided political process in the country, maybe the world. So the 3% put him there. You can't get that, right? So here's what they're about. The 3% wants the gross Ken Paxton in there, not because they necessarily are okay with him or agree with him, but because he's not them. That's it. Them. They think he fights them. The 3%, this is the part you don't get, and there's no way you should. The 3% would rather have a lying, cheating piece of trash like Ken Paxton in office as the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Texas since 2015, and probably back for more if he's not removed. They would rather have, by the way, a job most reasonable and normal people would say is the least suited for a slimy, lawless political maggot. You might look the other way, reasonable and normal people, if it was, I don't know, some obscure position, but it's the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Texas. Most reasonable, normal people would say that's the last job. You should have a slimy, lawless, maggot politician like this guy. It can't be okay. The 3% want him because he talks trash on them. He says he'll fight them. Donald Trump is the middle finger to them. And if Paxton and Trump are aligned, they are. The 3% think he'll fight them, and that's good enough. It doesn't matter what he does, or how bad he is, or what a bad look it is, or how immoral or indecent it can get. They only care, the 3% that govern all politics in the state of Texas. They decide everything in the state of Texas. As long as they think he's against them, the rest doesn't matter. Obviously, it doesn't matter. There's no way it'll make sense to you. Okay? There's no way you can justify it. There's no way any normal, reasonable person would think this entire process, this guy's political career, could make any sense at all, except that's 3%. That's what they're after. And he gives it, they think. So that's the math, and it's right, and that's the explanation for why he's even had the job that he might, don't know for sure, that he might still keep. Yes, it's gross. In no way should you get it.